we talk about NPP and GPP, we have to talk about photosynthesis and respiration. We all know that photosynthesis is what plants do, right? It captures the sunlight from the sun, solar energy from the sun, and turns carbon dioxide and water into oxygen and sugars. Those sugars then become part of the plant. Then the primary consumers eat the plant, secondary consumers eat that primary consumer, and now we have energy for life. We also know that respiration is when animals, like our friendly gorilla right here, breathes in oxygen, eats the sugars or the plant matter, and then breathes out carbon dioxide and expels water. Now, what you have to understand is two things. Plants actually do respiration as well. They do this when the sun goes down during the dark cycles. And what happens is they actually use that sugar to create their own biomass to make the tree grow or the plant grow. And so, what's important to remember is this: yes, photosynthesis and respiration are the turning of carbon dioxide into oxygen and the breathing in of oxygen and breathing out carbon dioxide. But you also have to think of this super important cycle slash balance as the exchange of carbon. Not just breathing in and breathing out, but the actual turning of carbon dioxide into biomass. So, this is something that I think a lot of people kind of overlook. The photosynthesis takes carbon dioxide out of the air and actually turns it into biomass. That then allows for the transfer of solar energy, which is where all the energy for everything comes from, allows for that transfer of that energy up through the food chain. So next time you go out and have a delicious dinner, a big old cheeseburger or some pizza, think, hey, I'm actually eating energy from the sun.
I found a perfect spot here to talk about net primary productivity, or NPP, and gross primary productivity, GPP. Now, first off, before we talk about that, think about gross primary productivity as your paycheck, right? So if you worked 5 hours in one day, you made $10 an hour, then your gross paycheck was 50 bucks. Now we're going to take taxes out of that, right? And so when you take the taxes out, maybe that's $10. So now your net pay is what you actually bring home, right? So your net pay would be 40 bucks. So that's what you have to spend and, do with whatever you please, I guess. So that's the difference between net and gross, right? Gross is what you start with. And then after you lose some because you got to do some work, right? You got to pay your taxes. What's left over is called your net. Now, gross primary productivity is the amount of photosynthesis. And I had the sun here, right up there. There we go, right? So gross primary photosynthesis is how much sunlight is actually captured by these producers here, these plants. Now, 99% of that sunlight either goes straight through the leaves, gets bounced back, but it doesn't get absorbed. Only 1% of that sunlight up above actually gets absorbed by the plant. So that's the gross primary productivity, only about 1% of that solar energy. Now, it just depends on, the leaves and the biology of the plant, right? How much joules of energy that actually can calculate into, but that's the percentages there. Now, the net primary productivity is not that full 1%. Why? Because the plant itself has to use that 1% that actually got absorbed from the sun, has to use that to create its own energy so that it can survive. So about 60% of that 1% of sunlight gets used up by the plant. 40% of that is left over for whatever comes along and eats it to absorb into their body. And so the little rabbit that's going to come over here and munch on these grasses is not getting the full energy from the sun, but ultimately the energy that rabbit gets is about 40% of 1%. But the energy that rabbit gets started with the sun, and so does the energy of practically everything else, with the exception of nuclear. But that's a whole nother topic. NPP and GPP. Hope that helped.
Go check out my cycles reels over at my Instagram at APES World TX. Have fun studying. Thanks for watching, and let's get outside.